What did an average family look like in England during the Edwardian period? Well, that depends on which family you're talking about because while the British were enjoying what many called the last phase of polite society, they have about 10 servants in total, including two maids, a butler, a cook. They live in a nice suburban home or a townhouse in London, and they have a little bit of money to spare. So they can afford a couple of servants, perhaps a cook and a maid. However, they were definitely feeling the pressure of trying to maintain their respectability and ensure that people do and gossip about them behind their back. And they're certainly not living in the lap of luxury like the upper classes. For the men, it's off to work as a clerk, office worker, shopkeeper, or small business owner. This means long hours at a desk, although it is considerably more genteel than the working man's job. Meanwhile, the wife is responsible for the smooth running of the house and may also participate in charity work or the church. Younger children go to school, and once they're old enough, the older ones are expected to help out, around the house too. On the weekends, the family might visit friends or relatives, and everyone is expected to be on their best behavior. Sundays are usually spent in church, followed by a large family dinner. Evenings are spent at home with piano playing, reading, or, for the grown-ups, a spot of social drinking. Everyone is in bed by 10 o'clock latest. Holidays are spent at seaside resorts or in the countryside, and outings are planned with other families from the church or the local community. There's no escaping the strict rules of etiquette, even amongst the middle classes. And everyone is striving to better themselves, save money, and educate their children. It's hard to say whether they're climbing the social ladder, but there's certainly an aspiration to do so. And a house parlor maid, as well as a nanny, a valet, a chauffeur, and a gardener. Their day starts early with a rush to get ready for work. The family home is a cramped terraced house or tenement building with little access to clean water or sanitation. The father works long hours in the mines or as a factory laborer, while the mother keeps the house clean and takes in washing or ironing to earn extra cash. Older children also work to contribute to the family income. School attendance is patchy at best, and a good education is something only afforded to the wealthy. Days are long and tiring with little time for rest. Meals are simple fare of bread, dripping, and tea, and perhaps some stew if they're lucky. The constant coal fire provides some warmth but little light. Sundays are pretty much the same, except that the family might go out for a cheap treat or a trip to the pub. If they're lucky, they might have an outing to the seaside or the countryside. But for most, there's no time or money for holidays. The family rarely, if ever, dines out. They have little access to modern conveniences like gas lighting, indoor plumbing, or electricity. Work dominates their lives, and there's little time for hobbies or leisure. Life expectancy is low, and the constant threat of illness and injury hangs over them. Most of their money goes on rent and food, leaving them with little left over for anything else. For working families, childhood is also harder and shorter than it might be for the upper and middle classes. In fact, there is a 50 chance that a child under 5 won't make it to the age of 10 due to high levels of disease and infant mortality. Additionally, accidents and fatalities at work are commonplace. So if one of the children is required to help out with the family income, well, their childhood really will be cut short. Sadly, this is the reality of life for most people in the Edwardian era, despite the rapid industrial and technological growth. The gap between the rich and the poor is widening, and there's little hope of escaping your social class. And so when it comes to daily life, well, everything is done for them. Our family wakes up fairly gently. Even though the men will probably be up at around 7 a.m. and they can enjoy a leisurely breakfast served directly in their bedroom, the ladies can stay in bed until 9 a.m. if they want to, and even then, it is just to sit and sip some tea and, perhaps, dictate a letter to their secretary before heading down to the breakfast room. All the while, servants are rushing around, making sure everything is perfect. For the gentlemen, this might include reading the morning paper, particularly the Times, which is considered the most respectable newspaper. But for the ladies, it's more likely that they'll correspond with their friends via letter writing, which was still very much the height of polite society. Perhaps later in the morning, the men might head out for a bit of shooting or fishing or take a ride in the horse-drawn carriage while the ladies entertain friends or oversee the domestic staff. For some, this might also be the time for shopping. However, ladies will change outfits anywhere from 3 to 5 times a day. So it's important to note that tailoring was a very big business indeed. It was normal for ladies to have several outfits made every year. Afternoon is generally a time for leisure, although the strictures of etiquette mean that it's a little more regimented than we might think today. So it could mean riding or driving out in the open-air carriage, calling on friends, having them over for tea, or playing sports such as tennis or croquet. Then come dinner, which is a great deal more formal than we might be used to today. This might be at 6 p.m. or later and could consist of as many as 9 courses. It was also common for men and women to be dressed in full evening dress, even if it's sweltering hot. And afterwards, they would separate to their own drawing rooms, which is the space where they'd receive guests and socialize. The men might smoke cigars and drink port in one room, while the women would do the same in another. Once they're ready for bed, which is usually around 11 p.m., it's just a case of retiring to bedchambers fit for a king or queen, with 4-poster beds and servants on hand to help get ready for sleep. As for the children, well, they're mostly raised by nannies and governesses and might only see their parents briefly in the afternoon. After all, it was widely believed that children should be raised by those who are experienced in childcare and not overburden their parents. It would be an understatement to say that there were stark differences between the haves and have-nots. In fact, the divide between the very rich and the very poor was growing wider than ever before. So let us take a glimpse over the shoulder of 3 different Edwardian families and see how they lived their daily lives around 1905. First up is our upper class family living in a lavish country estate, complete with servants' quarters. Next, we meet our respectable middle-class family. We're talking professionals and clerks, shopkeepers, and factory owners. Now, their lifestyle is undoubtedly comfortable. Finally, we come to our working-class family living in the slums of London or the industrial heartlands. What kind of day do you think you'd have in Edwardian England? Let me know in the comments below. And thank you so much for watching. Here's a fictional day in the life of 3 Edwardian families, 1 upper class, 1 middle class, and 1 working class to bring the era to life. Lady Agatha Fairfax, upper class life. 1906, 7:30 a.m. Agatha Fairfax stirs in her rose silk canopied bed in the great manor house. Sunlight streams through curtains of fine linen. Her lady's maid, Miss Roberts, stands by holding a tray with tea, milk, sugar, toast. Lord Fairfax smooths his dressing gown while reading a letter from the Foreign Office requesting a donation to build schools in South Africa. An excellent cause, he says, tearing off a check and handing it to his wife. I say we should hold an enormous jumble sale at the house and get the servants involved. They use a straw to stir the clotted cream in their tea. After changing into a beautiful beaded evening gown, she slips on her sprigged velvet slippers and heads downstairs to join her guests in the drawing room. They have been joined by a few men now, all old friends of her husband's. They drink champagne as a string quartet plays Mozart. At 8 o'clock, the entire company files into the dining room for an 8-course meal by candlelight. There are 4 courses of fish alone. Later, they talk about opera, politics, and Mrs. Astor, who married so poorly. The topic of conversation drifts from the recent royal christening to who is having an affair with whom. It's a hot afternoon. Then she inspects the work of the new maid, who seems satisfactory. His colleagues describe him as orderly and reliable. The woman hands over a list of groceries needed and asks for a day off tomorrow. Later, after Albert and Edith have gone to bed, Mr. and Mrs. Collins read. She reads a book on the evils of nicotine. He reads the Strand magazine. Sometimes they listen to the wireless, but there is no program until the evening. Frederick dreams of owning a motor car. Elizabeth dreams of a world without pain. They eat quickly, though, as it is hard to keep food down when the stomach is full of acid. Very well, says Mrs. Collins, but please have the laundry done by Monday morning. 2 are off to school. The eldest, 12, goes to the textile mill. Nell, the youngest, are tugging at her skirt, wanting breakfast. They gossip about the rising price of coal and the preacher who scolded them last Sunday. Did you hear his words? Woe unto you, hypocrites, says Mrs. Cohen. They all shake their heads in disapproval. She fixes them bread and dripping and sends them off to school. Tom comes home smelling of sea and sweat. Dinner is cabbage and boiled potatoes. Afterwards, Tom smokes his pipe and tells jokes. His 3-year-old son laughs, but the girls roll their eyes. The family squeezes around the hearth. Elsie patches trousers while Tom tells a story about a sailor who walked the plank. The day is long. She takes in laundry, scrubbing clothes in cold water, hanging them out to dry, and ironing them with heavy cast iron irons heated on the stove. Her neighbor, Mrs. Cohen, pops her head into chat. Where are you off to? Asks Elsie. Same as ever, my dear, replies Mrs. Cohen. The corner shop to buy paraffin and a penny dreadful. Come join me for a gossip later. Wouldn't miss it, says Elsie. Colin's darning socks while listening to her daughter play piano. Elsie eats a crust of bread with a little dripping left over from breakfast. Her youngest clings to her skirt while she works. She feels his small hand in hers and thinks, if only he could stay small forever. She then writes a letter to her sister in Kent and asks God to forgive her for her temper, as she did not mean to raise her voice yesterday. She only wanted to remind her husband that it was his duty as a Christian to help those less fortunate. Lord Fairfax winks. Agatha murmurs her approval while buttering a crumpet. Elsie says a prayer for better health, fewer rats, and no more rent increases. Tom yawns and leans back. Elsie strokes his hair. He is her best friend. She loves him so much. She dreams of a cottage with a garden where her children will run barefoot and happy. In the day's paper, the Morning Post, women sip weak tea and discuss the evils of alcohol. Afterwards, she buys a penny dreadful and reads about the suffragette movement. She does not agree with women wanting the right to vote, but she wonders what would it be like if she had the right to speak her mind without fear of consequence. Mr. Frederick Collins, a bank clerk, rises from his bed and begins dressing in a dark wool suit. She asks Edith, her eldest, to play piano while she prepares porridge and tea for her girls and pours out a spot of tea for her husband, who has just arrived back from London. He is tired and wants to rest, but first he opens his mail. There are bills to pay, letters to write, and a circular about investments in Argentina. Her husband, Tom, is stirring in their shared bed. Soon he will get up and leave for work. By 5:30, he will be at the docks loading crates onto ships bound for faraway lands. His wife, Elizabeth, is still sleeping, but soon she will be up making breakfast. In the next room, their 2 daughters, Florence and Edith, sleep soundly in their beds. Frederick knows he must leave soon to catch his train to London, but he pauses to polish his boots. He is a careful man and makes sure they shine. Downstairs, he eats breakfast with his 8-year-old son, Albert. As Albert runs off to school, Frederick checks his watch, picks up his briefcase, and walks to the train station. She watches the men light up their cigars before entering her carriage. Once inside, the driver unfurls the rugs and throws them over her feet. At home, her maid brushes her hair 100 strokes before bed, then tucks her in. Agatha dreams of Parisian hats. While the maid draws her bath, pouring rose water over the warm water, Agatha scrolls through the news, noting society events and snidely observing that the Duchess of Berwick's niece has married beneath her. 9a. Downstairs in the oak-paneled dining room, Agatha joins her husband, Lord Fairfax, for a light breakfast. 11. After her bath, dressed in a tailored walking dress, Agatha drives with her chauffeur to the dressmaker. A seamstress measures her arm with a tape measure. Silver cutlery gleams on crisp white linen as the footman serves soup, followed by grilled mutton, Yorkshire pudding, potatoes, carrots, green peas, and rhubarb crumble for dessert. All the while, the butler, Mr. Cartwright, supervises everything from behind his white mustache. Agatha announces she will attend the hunt later today. The other ladies express disapproval. Hunting animals is cruel. And what if a fox ran across the path of a lady? Ooh, the very idea. Precisely how last year, madame, except an inch longer, says the dressmaker, pinning a sketch to the fabric. Then Agatha continues on to the town center and drops by the local orphanage, which she patronizes with money and supplies. But mostly she does so to be seen doing good works by her fellow townspeople. Back in the car, she dictates letters to her secretary, thanking the Queen for attending her nephew's christening and accepting an invitation to a friend's house party. 1 p.m. Luncheon is served downstairs with her guests, 2 women from the church and the local vicar. 3 p.m. With the hunt cancelled due to rain, Agatha sits on a wicker chair on the lawn, drinking tea from a blue and white Chinese cup with 2 other ladies from the county. 6 p.m. Back in the manor, Agatha rests in her bedroom while her lady's maid draws her bath. 11 p.m. After brandy, cigars, and a game of bridge, Agatha says her goodbyes. Mr. Frederick Collins, Middle Class Life, 1906, 6:30 a.m. The gas lamp clicks on in the modest but tidy front room. 7:30 a.m. Mrs. Collins is up and laying the table. 8 Mrs. Collins sees her girls off to school. 1 p.m. Mr. Collins eats a meat pie and tea at his desk. He is a cautious man who deals in numbers. 3 p.m. Mrs. Collins attends a meeting at the Ladies' Temperance Society. 6 p.m. Family supper. The Collins discuss the King's visit to Paris and the possibility of getting a new gramophone. 8 p.m. The children do their homework. Mr. Collins reads the Strand magazine. Mrs. 10 p.m. lights out, gas lamps turned down. The Collins are proud to own their own home, even if they are paying for it on a mortgage. Mrs. Elsie Brown, Working Class Life, 1906, 4:45. Elsie Brown is already up, lighting the small coal fire under the kettle. 6 a.m. she gets the children up. 12:30 p.m. lunchtime. 3 p.m. neighbors gather outside their tenement for a quick chat. 5 p.m. children return from work and school, tired and grimy. 7 p.m. the children go to bed, 1 room, 1 blanket, each if lucky. Which period of history would you like us to cover next? Let us know in the comments. What did children do for fun in Edwardian England? Well, not much really, especially if you were poor. Today we look at children's lives in Edwardian England, an age of innocence spent in stark surroundings. But first, a word from our sponsor. We've got an upper-class girl, a middle-class boy, and a working-class girl. Their lives will be very different indeed. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel. Thanks. And now back to our video. Here are 3 children from different social classes. First, let's look at the life of a typical upper-class child. Miss Clementine Fairfax, age 8, lives in a grand house with her mother and father and probably several servants. Her world is safe and sheltered, filled with lessons and etiquette, nursery rhymes and games. A maid follows on foot, just in case of mud or mischief. 4 o'clock is the dreaded children's hour. Her mother is dressed for the day. His father is already at the station, likely on his way to London. Henry shares a bedroom with his sister. He scrubs his face in cold water, brushes his hair, fastens his school collar stiffly. His mother stands by, reminding him to take his satchel. The maid has burned the toast again. He takes his seat at the kitchen table and eats his porridge and the last piece of buttered toast. Her mother hands her a cup of weak tea. There's no time to complain. Little ones roll hoops, bigger ones trade marbles. Billy Webster drops his potato in the mud. He shrugs and eats it anyway. Back to work. For Nora, tying threads is easy. Now she can do it in her sleep. She hears him so small, his breath whistling in his chest. She hugs her worn rag doll, her only toy, and closes her eyes. Maybe one day she'll be a teacher, or maybe a lady in a fine hat. Still, she aches to be free. She dreams of warm socks and a red ribbon she saw in a shop window. Outside, it's 6 o'clock. The sky's light again. She waves to Albert as she heads home. She puts on her shawl, tugs on her bonnet, smooths down her dress. Her father snores softly in his chair. He works nights. Her mother has already stoked up the small fire in the grate, hanging out there only washing. Soon, Nora's out the door, walking with other children along dark streets to the textile mill. It's freezing. She rubs her hands to keep them from stiffening. The mill is noisy, filled with whistles and shouts. Once inside, it's dim and dusty. Nora ties broken threads on spinning machines. The overseer watches like a hawk. A boy named Albert cuts his finger. He's yelled at for bleeding on the floor. Nora winces. She once cut her hand too. She remembers being scolded for breaking a thread. That was 3 years ago. She was 7. She sits regally in the drawing room with her friends. The bell starts at 8:30. He runs down the street. Her father, who had docked for the night, says one day they'll have coal all winter. Nora hopes he's right. She misses school, but soon it will be time to start work. She asks her mother if she should learn to read and write. Her mother smiles sadly. You're a good girl, Nora. You help us all you can. For now, that's enough. The school looms ahead, a proper building, but grim. The headmaster looks like a buzzard. Inside, rows of desks wait. Henry finds an empty one and sits down. School starts with a prayer. Then it's Latin, spelling, arithmetic. The cane is a frequent threat. The boys whisper about it like ghosts. The headmaster cracks one over young Tommy Atkins's back. He deserved it, Henry thinks. He doesn't want to be hit either. Clementine curtsies and attempts polite conversation about the tulip beds. Lady Agatha listens patiently, then redirects her to the garden to play. 6 o'clock rolls around. Clementine's mother is upstairs dressing for the evening. It's nearly time for dinner, so the children are summoned to the nursery for supper. Nanny reads Peter Pan aloud. Clementine's brother falls asleep mid-chapter. Nanny hums God Save the King as she tucks them in. The food is laid out on the finest porcelain, but her brother wolfs it down. Patience, darling, her nanny says, reminding him that eating like a gentleman is a virtue. There's plenty of time to finish, but no jam. Jam is vulgar before 9. Soon after, her governess arrives. She's been summoned from her lodgings. Clementine Curtis and asks how she is. Some classmates have jelly. Henry does not. He notices Tom Atkins trading marbles for a bite of jelly. After school, Henry rushes home, skirting through the busy streets. He pours out his books, then sits with his sister for tea. His mother checks his copybook homework. His penmanship could be meager. She suggests he read Pilgrim's Progress while he reads Treasure Island. Henry would rather go out to play. Oh, never mind about me, miss. Now sit down and open your book. It's French verbs today, but she would rather read a storybook. The governess shakes her head. No stories till we're done with these. When the lesson ends, there's still more to cover. Penmanship, dictation, geography. Then music at 11. She sighs dramatically when told to practice scales. At 12:30, luncheon is taken with the governess. Dessert is blancmange, which Clementine considers sad jelly. Afterward, she runs out to the garden with her nurse. Miss Clementine awakens in the nursery suite, complete with a mahogany wardrobe, dainty curtains, a gilded mirror. Her nanny enters, holding a silvered bottle of warm milk. After a gentle word or two, it's time for her to dress. She pulls on a pale blue pinafore with broderie and glaze edging. Her nanny straightens the ribbons on her undergarments, laces up her boots. Outside, a chill wind blows. It's October. Downstairs, her mother stirs. She won't see her until 4 o'clock sharp, during the dreaded children's hour. And now it's time for bed. However, 7:30 m comes around quickly enough when your nanny is up with the lark. Clementine joins her little brother for breakfast in the nursery. He spills his Ovaltine, causing his nanny to sigh. At 2 o'clock, there might be a short ride in the pony trap if the weather is good. Now let's look at the life of a middle-class child. Henry Collins, age 10, wakes early. It's 8 o'clock. He must hurry if he's to make it to school on time. Lunches from home, a cheese sandwich, an apple. And finally, let's look at the life of a working-class child. Nora Brown, age 11, wakes in the dark, beneath a thin blanket shared with 2 siblings. Time passes slowly. It's 12 o'clock. It's time for a half-hour break. Nora eats a potato from her apron pocket, watching other children at play. Home is dark and cramped, but warm. Her mother rubs her tired feet. They eat cabbage stew and bread. That night, Nora helps her mother fold laundry by firelight. Her youngest brother coughs again. The doctor won't come unless they pay. Last time we talked about food in the Edwardian era. Today we're talking about holidays and leisure. As always, we'll be looking at how the experience varied between the upper classes, the middle classes, and the working classes. This period saw the beginnings of modern vacation culture, but how it looked depended entirely on your wealth and status. Let's start with the holidays taken by the wealthiest people in Britain, the upper classes. What would their holidays have been like? When the summer rolls around, they pack up their bags and take the train down to Brighton to spend the season by the seaside. And because the Fairfaxes are upper class, they'll be staying on the western side of the seafront, which was much more expensive and much more exclusive. Before returning to their hotel, they might partake in a spot of yachting or perhaps a game of tennis, though that does involve mixing with other people and therefore needs to be avoided. They might head to the French Riviera to stay in Nice, Cannes, or Monte Carlo. Or if they're interested in archaeology, they'll take a Nile cruise to see the pyramids. After all, they could afford to spend months gallivanting around Europe or the British countryside. Upper-class holidays usually lasted for weeks or even months. Even if they did feel the need to cut their trip short, they could afford to pay for transport at a moment's notice. It wouldn't be a problem to book a train or a steamer for whenever they felt like returning home. Let's meet the Collins family, a middle-class family living in London. Mr. Collins will have booked his holiday in advance, making sure that they re-off during the school holidays so that Arthur and Mabel can enjoy some time away from lessons. Their room will be small but comfortable, with a bed for each member of the family and somewhere for them to store their things. Breakfast will be a simple affair, probably cold as Mrs. Collins isn't a great believer in getting up early and starting the fire. Afterwards, they might take a turn on the donkey rides or play a game in the penny arcade. When the sun goes down, they'll find somewhere cheap and cheerful to eat before returning to their boarding house to rest. They usually took a single week off work and school to enjoy a break. However, they may have spread their holiday over several different occasions throughout the year. For example, they might have taken a long weekend in May, a weekend in August, and a long weekend in October. Their house is small, but it's home. And when the summer rolls around, they're desperate for a change of scene. He and his wife, Mary, have saved all year for this week. It's their annual holiday. This meant that they could enjoy the benefits of a holiday without having to take too much time away from their work or studies. Lunch will be eaten out, most likely fish and chips enjoyed on the beach, and dinner will be whatever Mrs. Collins feels like cooking that day. They didn't have the same amount of disposable income, and they were less likely to see foreign travel as a priority. The children will either swim in their underclothes or just paddle in the shallows. They'll skip stones or listen to the street musicians and jugglers. Overall, the working classes enjoyed holidays, but they were much more likely to focus on spending time with family and friends rather than seeing new places. They'll collect shells and brightly colored pebbles to remind them of their day out. They also face more practical constraints, such as the need to keep up with their work while on holiday. For the working classes, holidays were a rare treat. They didn't have the same amount of time or money as the middle classes, and they rarely took holidays that lasted for more than a day at a time. They usually took a single day off work to enjoy a break. Asterisk, 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 the life of Edwardian servants. Edwardian school life in detail. Asterisk, 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 the rise of new inventions. Asterisk, asterisk. However, some working people did take longer holidays, usually by taking several days off work and paying for the rest of their time. And he'll make sure that they re-back before early September when prices start to drop, and the resort is full of children whose parents have been made unemployed for the winter. How did their annual break compare to the luxury holidays taken by the upper classes? They aren't quite as wealthy as the Fairfaxes, so they can't afford to take a long holiday and stay at a fancy resort for weeks at a time. But they can still afford to take a week-long trip to the seaside once a year. Ideally, they'd love to stay overnight, but a day trip is all they can afford. Luckily, their eldest daughter, Nora, doesn't mind. The factory will pay for the return train tickets, and the church will provide a simple meal. These outings are always a highlight of the year for the Brown family, though sometimes the adults get a bit drunk on the train and the outing ends in disaster. She spends most of her time running barefoot along the beach, laughing at the seaside puppets and sharing a stick of rock candy with her little brother, Thomas. They'll enjoy ice cream, watch Punch and Judy shows, and brave the hulking great bathing machines that sit on the beach. They'll take it in turns to go into the sea, though for the most part, they'll just paddle in the shallows. If not, then they'll make do with sitting on the beach and sleeping in their coats. At least they'll have the sand to keep them cool. Mr. Collins will hold his bowler hat in the wind while Mrs. Collins reminds the children not to get too sandy. If Lord Fairfax is in need of some health, then a trip to the Swiss Alps is in order. Or if he wants to gamble, then a visit to the spa town of Baden-Baden is recommended. They liked the chance to get out of the city and enjoy the fresh air of the coast. But they also enjoyed the chance to mix in with other people from different social backgrounds. Many of the resorts that the middle classes visited were also popular with the working classes, so they had the chance to rub shoulders with people from all walks of life. Servants will attend to their picnics, so they don't need to lift a finger. Holidays were long and leisurely affairs for the upper classes, sometimes taking up an entire season of the year. With lashings of hot water, copious amounts of sugar, and cucumber sandwiches, they'll sit in the warmth, sipping their tea and discussing the latest scandal to hit London society. They were able to completely switch off from the demands of everyday life and focus purely on their own enjoyment. Of course, there was no such thing as a cheap holiday. And while money didn't really play a huge role for the upper classes when booking their breaks, they would still have had to consider the length of their trip. Once they've sufficiently relaxed after their stimulating conversation, they might decide to take a horse-drawn carriage ride further down the coast to admire the view. They join fellow aristocrats and wealthy industrialists for a leisurely stroll along the promenade. stopping every so often to watch the bathing machines go trundling into the water. That's why the aristocracy tended to spend just a few weeks or months away at a time before returning home. However, they would have been able to afford to travel to pretty much anywhere they wanted whenever they wanted without having to worry about cost, and to discuss what a terribly indelicate thing that is. For the duration of their stay, they'll be staying at one of the luxurious hotels right on the promenade. From here, they can walk out onto the pebbled beach below and enjoy the therapeutic sound of the sea without having to actually get their feet wet, because to do that would involve mixing with the masses. Let's meet the Fairfaxes, a wealthy couple living in a large house in London. Brighton was one of the most fashionable resorts at this time. From here, they can stop off for tea at one of the many elegant tea rooms lining the front. They'll also take advantage of the concerts and operas being held at the Grand Pavilion, stopping off afterwards for some supper. If the Fairfaxes were feeling adventurous, they could take a trip abroad. They'll likely be spending an entire season abroad, a month or more in one location, away from the hurly-burly of England, enjoying the peace and quiet of the mountains or the sunny climes of the Mediterranean. The idea of a short break wasn't really something they had to contend with. For the upper classes, holidays were a time for relaxation and rest. The longer they stayed away, the more expensive their holiday would become. Now let's talk about how the middle class spent their holidays. Usually they'll take the train up to Scarborough or Margate, though sometimes they'll splurge and head up to Blackpool or down to Southend. While in Scarborough, the Collins family will be staying in a boarding house near the seafront. When they're not eating, they'll be partaking in traditional seaside activities. Then they'll pose awkwardly for a postcard picture with a bucket and spade. For the middle classes, holidays were mostly centered around the seaside. It would have been unusual for the middle classes to take holidays that lasted for more than a week at a time. The middle classes would have also been less likely to travel abroad than the upper classes. Finally, let's talk about the holidays taken by the working classes. Let's meet the Browns, a typical working class family living in a terraced house in Birmingham. Luckily, Mr. Brown works in a factory that shuts down for a week in August, giving everyone a well-needed rest and the chance to enjoy the sunshine. They're hoping to take a day trip down to the coast. She loves coming to the seaside. If they're lucky, they'll be able to hire a cheap room for the night. Sometimes the church or the benevolent society Mr. Brown belongs to will organize a trip to the coast. Mr. Brown usually packs a sandwich for lunch, though if there's meat in it, it's a real treat. And if they're lucky, they'll have enough money to hire one of the wind-up cameras and take a snapshot of the family on the beach. They were also more likely to travel by train than by other means, as this was usually the cheapest option. I hope you enjoyed learning about holidays and leisure in the Edwardian era. Would you like to continue with ***** meals across the classes?